The average man lives on a borrowed life. He lives on Elon Musk's story, on Job's story, on a saint's story, on a friend's story. He substitutes his own emptiness with someone else's drama. He kneels before idols because he cannot face the terror of his own life. But the extreme is different. The extreme is where no idol can save you, no second-hand story can carry you. It is your storm, it is your furnace. It is not about Elon Musk or anyone else. It is about standing in a place where there is no handrail, no map, no guarantee. The extreme is not pleasure. Pleasure dies quickly. It is not longing. Longing is fantasy. The extreme is war, not war outside, but war inside. The unrelenting confrontation with yourself. When you enter that storm, you do not become Musk, Jobs, or Buddha. You become you, and that is why you fear it, and that is why you avoid it. Unless you find your own extreme, you will forever live in someone else's shadow, worshipping their fire, while yours turn to ash. Finding extreme is not gradual. Gradual is the language of the mediocre. Gradual is the language of the frightened man who wishes to keep one foot in safety while pretending to walk toward the fire. Extreme is not a destination, it is a plunge, it is a burn. It is when you are stripped of your comforts, your lies, your idols, and there is no later to retreat into. To find your extreme is not to shop for it like a commodity, it is to notice the one thing that terrifies you most, the one road where your mind screams, not that, anything but that. That is your extreme. It is the place where the stakes are unbearable, where reputation, security, and identity are set aflame. You cannot walk into it politely. You do not dabble in the storm. You throw yourself in. That is why so few ever touch it, because they wait for it to come gradually, in steps, in increments, in a safe evolution. But the extreme is the enemy of safety. It arrives all at once. And if you ask how important it is everything. For without it, you live half dead. You live in comparison, in worship, in shadows. You live someone else's script. The extreme is not about achieving, it is about dying to everything false. In that death, something fierce and alive begins. Living without the extreme is not truly living, it is merely existing. You walk through days as an actor, reciting lines written by someone else, parents, society, culture, idols. You borrow their goals, their definitions of success, their visions of greatness, and in doing so, you erase yourself. You become a shadow that feeds on shadows. Comparison is the poison of this existence. You look at Elon Musk, Jobs, saints, athletes, and you live off their stories like a parasite. You worship their fire because you are terrified of discovering your own. It feels safer to admire than to burn, safer to fantasize than to enter the storm. But the extreme is a different realm. It has nothing to do with achievements, applause, or external recognition. The extreme is not about what you gain, it is about what you lose. You lose your false ambitions, you lose your borrowed scripts, you lose the endless craving for validation. The death of the false is the birth of the real, and this death is not gentle, it is violent. It rips apart the illusions you've clung to for years. That is why it feels like a storm. That is why the average man avoids it. But when the false dies, what remains is something fierce, something alive, not a copy, not a follower, not a worshipper, a warrior, a man who breathes his own air, whose fire is his own, who no longer requires the crutches of idols and borrowed stories. The extreme is the furnace in which mediocrity is burned away, leaving only the raw steel of your being. You have been trained your whole life to think in terms of gain, more money, more recognition, more followers, more knowledge, more progress, always adding, piling, accumulating. You think this is growth, but this endless pursuit is the very machinery of mediocrity. The extreme is the opposite. It does not add, it subtracts. It is a stripping, a cutting away. You lose false ambitions, the goal you chase because society told you they are important, the dream of becoming successful because success is worshipped. These ambitions are borrowed clothes. You wear them, but they do not fit. The extreme burns them off. You lose borrowed scripts. The life plan written by others, family expectations, cultural ideals, startup myths, motivational cliches. You recite them, but they are not your voice. The extreme tears the script from your hand and leaves you unscripted, naked, raw. You lose endless craving for validation. Every achievement you chase is secretly to be seen, admired, applauded, but applause is never enough. You chase it like a thirsty man drinks seawater, it only deepens your thirst. In the extreme, there is no audience, there is only you and the storm. There, validation dies. So, the extreme is not a place of getting, it is a place of losing, and in that losing, something real is uncovered. When the masks fall, the crutches break, the illusions burn, what remains is not more, what remains is you. That is why the extreme is terrifying, because the self you build, the persona, the worshipper, the achiever, all of that is set on fire. The self you believe yourself to be, the ambitious man, the achiever, the one who compares, the one who worships Elon Musk or some idol, is a construction. It is made of stories you have told yourself and the stories others have told you. This self is fragile. It depends on recognition, on progress, on applause. It depends on being on track. It depends on having a future that looks meaningful. When you step into the extreme, this constructed self cannot survive because the extreme does not care about your plans. It does not care about your reputation, your achievements, your comparisons. It burns them all. That is why it feels terrifying because everything you think you are begins to collapse. You feel as though you are dying. In truth, it is only the mask that is dying. The persona, the achiever, the worshipper, all of it is reduced to ash. The terror is real because you have identified with this mask for so long that its death feels like your own. But once the false burns, you realize something astonishing. You remain. Not the image of you, not the worshipper or the imitator, but the raw, unmanufactured being that has no need for validation, no need for idols, no need for scripts. That is why the extreme is both terrifying and liberating. It annihilates the self you build, but it reveals the life you've never touched. When I say you are half dead without your extreme, I mean this. You walk, but you do not live. You breathe, but you do not taste life. You work, but it is all rehearsal. You pursue goals, but they are someone else's. Half dead means you are animated but not alive. You are functioning but not burning. You live on crumbs, validation, comparison, borrowed dreams, while the feast of real existence rots untouched. When you do not find your extreme, you are condemned to worship idols, Elon Musk, jobs, saints, actors. You live off their fire because you never lit your own. Chase shadows, money, fame, recognition. Each time you get a piece, it evaporates and you must chase again. Live borrowed scripts. You follow maps written by parents, culture, society. Safe maps, predictable maps, maps that keep you asleep. This is half deadness, a dull hum, a life that looks alive from the outside, but inside nothing stirs. The extreme is the antidote. It is when you step into the storm where you cannot fake, cannot hide, cannot borrow. It is where you risk everything, and in doing so, you touch the raw electricity of being alive. Without that plunge, your life remains lukewarm, and lukewarm is death disguised as life. The extreme is exposure. When you step into your extreme, there are no buffers left, no backups, no fallback plans, no polite exits. You cannot fake because the storm will tear the mask from your face. In safe environments, you can play roles, the achiever, the humble one, the hardworking man. But in the extreme, the storm exposes whether you are real or counterfeit. If you fake strength, you collapse. If you fake conviction, the fire burns through you. The extreme allows no pretending. You cannot hide because there is nowhere to hide. Outside the storm, you can bury yourself in distractions, in comparisons, in stories of others. But in the extreme, all the shields are stripped. You are naked in front of yourself. Your fears, your weaknesses, your desperation, everything is seen. You cannot borrow because borrowed fire dies in the storm. You cannot recite Elon Musk's story to survive. You cannot lean on culture's slogans, on motivational quotes, on second-hand philosophies. None of that holds when you are alone in your war. The storm demands your fire, not someone else's. And why do I say you must risk everything? because that is the price of truth. If you hold back, if you keep something safe, your reputation, your security, your identity, then you are not in the extreme. You are dabbling, you are visiting the edges while keeping your lifeboat ready. The extreme burns the lifeboat. It leaves you with nothing but yourself. That is why it feels like risking everything. Because you are asked to stand without props, without idols, without assurances. And in that moment, terrifying, raw, unprotected, you taste life as it is, not as a concept. That is the electricity of being alive. Your entire life, you've been building lifeboats, safety nets, assurances, things that say, if this fail, I'll still have that. If I lose this, I'll still be okay. If people don't like me, I still have another mask to wear. These lifeboats keep you comfortable. They give you a sense of control, but they also keep you off dead because they protect you from ever facing the naked truth of yourself. The extreme burns the lifeboat. When you step into it, you cannot lean on plan B. You cannot lean on reputation or identity. You cannot hide behind knowledge, excuses, or borrowed wisdom. The storm strips you bare, and for the first time, you are standing without anything to hold on to, only yourself. This is why it feels like risking everything, because the things you thought made you, status, image, safety, validation, are gone. They dissolve in the fire. And in that terrifying rawness, something happens. You discover what is real. You discover a strength that does not come from applause, a clarity that does not come from comparison, a life that is not dependent on safety nets. That is the electricity of being alive. Not the dull hum of existing safety, but the searing current of standing unprotected in the storm, where every cell of you is awake. This is why people spend lifetimes avoiding it, because to step into it is to let everything false burn, and most would rather remain half dead than feel the terror of that burning. When I say burn your lifeboat, I mean this. The human being always keeps an escape hatch. He says he wants freedom, greatness, truth. But he keeps a hidden pocket of safety, a second option, a way to retreat. If the job doesn't work, I have another. If the business fails, I'll go back to comfort. If people reject me, I'll play another role. If the truth is too much, I'll hide behind idols or philosophies. This is the lifeboat. It is the guarantee you keep in your back pocket so you never have to face the storm naked. But the extreme demands everything. It does not let you play with safety nets. It does not allow you to say, I'll try, but if it gets too hard, I'll escape. In the extreme, there is no escape. The bridges are burned. The lifeboat is gone. That is why it feels like risking everything, because you actually do. You risk your image, your identity, your comfort, your future. You are asked to stand stripped, without props, without borrowed stories, without assurances of survival. And that is precisely why it is alive. Because for the first time, there is no fallback, no mask, no script. You are there, raw, trembling, awake. Most people never live this way. They always preserve a lifeboat. They say they want the fire, but they keep a bucket of water nearby. That is why they remain half dead. The extreme is the fire that consumes every lifeboat, and only then does the real you emerge. You have seen it with clarity. Your 10 to 15 crore asset is your lifeboat. It whispers, why risk? Why leap? You are already safe. Even if you fail, you'll be fine. This is the velvet cage. It looks like security, but in truth, it is anesthesia. It numbs you. It keeps you half dead. Because the fire of necessity, the fire that forces you into your extreme, is dulled by the cushion of comfort. Now, how do you burn the lifeboat in your case? Not by throwing away the money, not by being reckless. That would be another form of ego. The burning is not physical, it is psychological. Burning the lifeboat means you stop leaning on it as your identity. You stop saying, I'm safe because I have 15 crores. You treat it as if it doesn't exist. You live and act as if you were on the street, as if you had nothing to catch you. You place yourself in arenas where the money cannot help you, places where only your fire, your courage, your risk taking can keep you afloat. For example, if you want to build something, create it in a way where your wealth offers no shortcut. Don't buy your way in, enter naked. If you want to live fully, put yourself in situations where failure has consequences for your soul, not your bank account, a place where no rupee can shield you from the storm. If you crave intensity, commit to something so extreme that even with 100 crores in the bank, you cannot buy comfort. The lifeboat is not the asset itself, it is your psychological dependence on it. Burn that dependence and you will taste life again. Because until then, you are insulated, and insulation is another word for half dead. You have 15 crores and you are dying, not because the money is bad, but because you worship it as your safety. You have made it your lifeboat. You stoke it, polish it, lean on it. You tell yourself, I am fine, I can take risks, I am secure. And so you never enter the fire. You think wealth is freedom. It is not. It is chains of gold. Burning the lifeboat does not mean throwing the money away. That would be the act of a fool. It means you stop kneeling before it. You stop glancing at it before making every decision. You live as if it does not exist. The man with nothing is often closer to truth than the man with plenty because he has no illusions of safety. He must burn, he must fight, he must enter the extreme. The extreme begins when nothing can save you. Not your money, not your reputation, not your idols, not your cleverness. It is when you stand without crutches, naked, alone, exposed. That is when you are alive. Until then, you are half dead. There is no how. The moment you ask how, you are already reaching for a handrail, already reaching for a step by step, already looking for safety while speaking of fire. Burning the lifeboat is not a method, it is a severance, it is a refusal. You look at the cross and you see your God, you see your mother's lap, you see your coffin, you touch it before every move. That is why you are dead. Living as if it does not exist means you no longer allow it to whisper to you. You stop listening, you stop consulting, you stop protecting it as if it is your life. It is not your life, it is your death. You must act as if you were stripped of everything tonight. Nothing to fall back on, no cushions, no identities, only you and the storm. That is not a technique, that is a decision, a ruthlessness, a killing of the voice that says you are safe. Because safety is the drug, safety is the half death, safety is the lullaby. The extreme is when there is no safety and still you walk in. Plan B is the lifeboat. Plan B is the quiet promise you whisper to yourself. If this doesn't work, I'll be fine. I have a backup. But the backup castrates you. It neuters your intensity. Because when the fire comes, you retreat into the shadow of safety. You never fight with your full blood. Burning the lifeboat means there is no plan B. It means this has to happen or I burn with it. That is why it is alive. Because when the escape is gone, when there is nowhere else to run, your entire being is forced into the fight. Every cell, every drop of you is present. That is the extreme. That is why it is terrifying, and that is why it is the only way. Knowledge is cheap, extreme is priceless. You can spend your entire life collecting prescriptions, podcasts, journals, steel frames of understanding, and still remain dead. Because knowledge is a cushion, knowledge is another lifeboat. It convinces you that you are preparing, that you are getting closer, but the fire never touches you. And then there is the man who knows nothing, who has no frameworks, who cannot spell second brain, but he throws himself into the storm. He bleeds, he burns, he fails and fails and fails and fails again. And in that furnace, he becomes alive. This is why you've seen people with libraries in their head who never built anything, and people with empty heads who created empires. It is not about knowing, it is about being naked. The extreme does not care what you know. It does not care about your notes, your journals, your knowledge. In the storm, all of that burns. Only the raw animal of you remains. So, yes, better to know nothing and enter the fire than to know everything and stay outside it. Understand this, information is rehearsal. The extreme is the performance. Rehearsal without performance is death disguised as progress. And the reason you love knowledge is because it feels safe. It feels like movement without exposure. It gives you the illusion that you are advancing, but until you throw the book down and step into the storm, you will remain a librarian of dead words. The man in the extreme may be ignorant, but at least he is alive. So, if you want to know why every cell of you is awake when you are in the fire, because the fire doesn't allow sleep. When you stand in the fire, there is no cushion, no escape, no safe corners to lean on. The body, the mind, the soul, they are forced into total presence. Every cell is recruited, every nerve is lit. The luxury of dullness dies. That is why the extreme awakens you. That is why in the furnace you discover a life that is not half asleep, not half dead.